When Luz was first introduced when the Owl House first premiered, she was seen as yet another bubbly, optimistic main character, something that had been a trend in cartoons for a while. But as the series progressed, she was shown to be more complex and three-dimensional, beyond having a happy-go-lucky attitude. Her lack of friends back home, nobody being understanding of her interests, her dead dad, and not being able to confide with anyone else other than her mom. The girl has trauma, especially after living on the Boiling Isles. Everyone's aware of it. However, there's one part of her character that is overlooked. And with the end of season 2, I think it's time we discuss. Luz has many flaws. She's naive, impulsive, and doesn't really understand social cues sometimes. She also has redeeming qualities such as being creative, determined, unconditionally kind, and supportive, and she always wants to right her wrongs. Seems simple on paper, but what if a quality of hers is also a flaw? A mentally damaging one at that. Ladies and gentlemen, Luz Noceda is a people pleaser. I know most of you are confused and typing in the comments. Luz is fine with people not liking her, and she has boundaries. But there's more to being a people pleaser than that. People pleasers are people who put others' needs before their own. Now, that alone doesn't sound bad, and being selfless isn't bad at all. But any good thing can become bad when it's taken to the extreme. A lot of times, people pleasers almost become addicted to the idea of sacrificing their needs and wants to feel like that they have a purpose, and it happens a lot more often than it should. Now, I want to stress, being a people pleaser isn't a mental illness by itself. People pleasing is associated with a personality trait called sociotropy. However, it seems very likely that the more destructive version of people pleasing stems more from mental illness and trauma. People pleasing can be done as a way to seek validation or keep relationships stable, and someone having those issues is indicative of some trauma. These sorts of things don't just appear, and I doubt simply being a selfless person on its own would create this unhealthy mindset. Now, back to Luz. Luz is obviously a very selfless person, falling into the personality trait of sociotropy. She's also very passionate about those that she cares about. However, she also puts a lot of blame on herself way too much and is not hesitant at all to sacrifice her wants or even herself for those she cares about. Again, nothing wrong with that in moderation, and it does depend on context. I'm not gonna get up on my soapbox and scream that Luz doing the trials to get Owlbird back or to get Amity's job back are wrong and unhealthy. Luz made a mistake when it came to Owlbird, and she wanted to take responsibility and fix her wrongs, although she was stubborn with asking for help. And although Amity didn't blame her, it was still partially Luz's fault that Amity lost her job. I say partially because Amity, girl, you could have asked your boss to get the book himself, you dumb lesbian. But Luz going through trials to get her job back isn't unhealthy at all. It's sweet and selfless. So far you must be thinking, well, it sounds like Luz is just selfless and kind, so why are you considering her as a people pleaser? Let's take a look at the season 1 finale, Youngblood Old Souls. Now, nobody ever blames Luz for what happened to Ida, not even Ida herself. So although she was the reason Ida got captured, the audience and the characters understand that Luz had good intentions. However, listen to Luz's dialogue.
Ida used her powers to save me and got caught by Lilith. Now she's the Owl Beast and is being taken before the Emperor. I'm going to rescue her. Please try to understand. Ida is in this situation because of me. Because of my stupid choice. I have to make up for it. But I can't! It's my fault you needed to save me. It's my fault you got captured.
She doesn't cut herself any slack whatsoever. She goes straight to rescuing Ida herself to right her wrongs. Now that alone is something anyone can experience, and Luz going to fight a magical British guy from her owl mom is peak girl boss. However, it isn't an isolated incident, and it's not forgotten either. Season 2, episode 1, Separate Tides. The entire premise is how Luz feels like a burden and still feels at fault for Ida losing her magic, and them financially struggling.
This is awful. Ida wouldn't be in this situation if it weren't for me. Maybe it would be better if I never came here. Can't change the past, but I can still change the future. I'm gonna help Ida and prove that I'm more than just a burden. You heard what he said, Ida. If you and King want to be free, then I have to do this alone.
What's this alone business? Don't you remember? Us weirdos have to—
What? Stick together? Because you stuck with me, you lost your magic. You almost got turned to stone, and now you can't even afford your apple blood because you're worried about what I need to eat. It's my fault all this happened. That's why I've got to do this alone. I'll make it all up to you, Ida the Owl Lady. I promise.
So she goes all out to help, endangering herself while doing so. She knows full well about the risks. Ida has a much needed talk with Luz, and everything is solved. Right? If only it was that easy. If it were, therapist sessions would only be 5 minutes. Then we skip to Hollow Mind in the following episodes after. Luce learns that she inadvertently helped a genocidal maniac with his plan to kill off all the witches. Yeah, not gonna do great for the psyche. Luce is absolutely traumatized by this, but listen again to her dialogue.
We have to stop Bellows. I was a part of his plan. I fell for everything. I am not hiding. I'm gonna stop Bellows from completing the draining spell.
She never once says, I didn't know, or I couldn't have known it was him, which are both reasonable responses to the conflict, because there was no way Luce could have known. However, trusting a 1600s Puritan pilgrim was a bad move. Luce is once again blaming herself. And what is the first thing that she does?
I'm gonna stop Bellows from completing the draining spell.
She wants to be directly involved with stopping him. She might have been wanting to take the crusty man down since the season 1 finale, but it went into overdrive here to the point where Ida and her have a fight because Ida, reasonably so, wants to keep Luce safe. Cause she's a child. She shouldn't have this responsibility hanging on her. Luce thinks otherwise, though.
You're sending me away? But I can help. Why don't you get that yet? I'm not going anywhere until Bellows is defeated. But I can help with your plan. Why couldn't you just let me help with your stupid plan? Is it because I'm a kid? Do you think I'm still that weak?
It's almost as if she feels like she's obligated to fix her mistake, one that she feels is unforgivable, irredeemable, inexcusable. She is the only person blaming her for Bellows' plan, and it comes to a breaking point in King's Tide, the season 2 finale. Luce switched places with Hunter in order to personally fight Philip. Again, knowing the risks, and even makes a deal with Bellows, basically sacrificing herself and leaving her friends and family for their safety. Of course, this is a ruse, but we'll come back to that. We get to the end of the episode where the Hex Squad are running towards the portal as the castle is being torn apart by the Collector, all except for Luce. While it isn't her first instinct, in a split second of running, she wants to go get Ida instead of head for safety. Amity gets her to run to safety, but then Luce decides to stay behind in the crumbling building to keep the portal open and to get Ida. Girl, you know you're gonna die, right? Like, come on. And I think she knows that it's a possibility of that. She might only be promising she'll find a way so that Amity and Co can go through the portal. She knows how they are. Remember when I brought up the ruse that was earlier in the episode? It's not out of character for Luce to do that at all. Of course, her promising doesn't work, obviously. Luce is blasted through the portal by King Scream with the rest of the Hex Squad into the human realm, concluding the 2nd season. Obviously, Luce has a lot of trauma from that alone, but Dana's artwork tells something different. Luce's expression and body language here is off. She's angry and cold, and her arms are in her pockets, not hugging Amity back. She's closed off. But compare that to Hunter, who also looks very angry, but he's hugging Willow and Gus. He's at least becoming more open, as opposed to Luce, who is becoming more closed off. Now put this into perspective. Luce already feels at fault for the Day of Unity happening to begin with. Now put that on top of not knowing if Ida or the entirety of the Boiling Isles is alive. We know Ida is alive, because we're the audience, but Luce doesn't know that. She also doesn't know if her little brother King is safe, and there's an extremely powerful godlike child wreaking havoc. Luce thinks it's all her fault, and with her behavior beforehand, she is not giving herself any excuses or benefit of the doubt, which she does for most people. She's angry at herself, feeling like an awful person, and she's stuck in the human realm with no way to help. And her trying to fix her mistakes was at least giving her some sense of sanity, or like she was a good person, even if at a lot of times it was unhealthy. She doesn't have that now. Luce is gonna be stuck, unable to fix what she sees as her mistake, putting the almost or possible deaths of millions onto herself. And she's powerless to do anything right now. Like she's a failure and has no purpose. Luce is gonna start closing herself off in fear of making another mistake or feeling like a monster. Hell, if it gets extremely bad, she may even compare herself to Philip, contradicting and mirroring the scene.
I'm not like you!
Just showing how low her self-worth is. Okay, we've come to the conclusion that Luce is traumatized and developed these behaviors after almost losing Ida. However, it isn't that clean cut. The root of this is Luce's self-worth, because it isn't just her obsession with self-sacrifice. It's about putting too much blame onto herself. That repeated behavior can't be stemmed from the events of the season 1 finale alone, which is why I ask that we look at something I know seems unrelated. Luce's way of helping people in most situations. She does these grand gestures, being selfless, like with Escape of the Palisman and Through the Looking Glass Ruins. These aren't unhealthy behaviors by themselves. They do seem like a pattern though. Here is my theory on why Luce does all these grand gestures, specifically, aside from being a creative and spontaneous person by nature. It all stems from 3 specific scenes in the show that display Luce's past. Let's look at the first.
Mija, I love your creativity, but it's gotten out of hand. Do you remember why you were in the principal's office the last 3 times?
Oh, Happy Dagger, give me death! Now, for the final anatomically correct touch, spider breath. You think that's an impressive trick? Take a look at this. Bleep, bloop, bleep.
I made a short video about this a while back, although I made a small error, but my point still stands. It seems very odd that Luce would go from this to this. That's cause they're out of order in the episode. Luce's antics get more extreme and dangerous, and I don't think it's due solely to her creative spark. Her classmates don't like her, it's pretty obvious. So it seems like she pushes more and more to try to impress them. Now let's look at the second clip.
Asking her out should be breathtaking, emotional, and real. Everyone back home said I was cheesy. Can't let Amity think the same. Oh no, I'm gonna be made fun of again.
People at home thought that she was cheesy, which means unlike Amity, she may have experience with crushes back home, which is why she's fretting over her confession being perfect. She's so afraid of rejection. Honestly, the fact she already knows Amity likes her, she kissed her for fuck's sake, she thinks that Amity will change her mind instantly if she's cheesy or just herself. That's extremely sad. Now, let's look at the final clip, and it's the most important.
Cool, talking rats. Maybe they know something. Okay, you gotta be careful approaching high schoolers. Mark all your exit routes and...
Actually, these guys are cool.
Ah, wait, hey! Hello. Oh, she's gonna embarrass herself. I can't watch.
Luce would rather talk to rats than people her own age, aside from the people in the demon realm, which I'll get to that. She is so used to rejection and mockery that she doesn't even try to make relationships. She doesn't know how to socialize with them because every time she's tried, they've ostracized her. Luce indulges in fantasy as a way to cope, and she's more sociable in the demon realm because she knows she'll feel less out of place there. Let me repeat that. Luce feels like she belongs more in a different realm than hers. She won't be labeled weird for the same reason. She's labeled as weird because she's a human, not because of her interests or actions. She still longs for people to accept her back home though. Everyone wants human connection. It's in our nature and the road to happiness. She wants to prove that she can be a witch because being herself back home isn't enough for them. The idea of grand gestures to impress people or to gain approval isn't consciously done, and it transfers over to the demon realm even though she's in a supportive environment. I think this quote from Cinema Therapy sums it up extremely well.
But he's so into all this entertainment, the acting for himself, all these habits, because he's so alone.
Yeah.
And when we don't have real connection, we sacrifice, we get really into TV shows, we get really into movies. I mean, even more so than normal, to the point where we're out of balance because we don't want to have actual relationships. Right. Or we want to, but we're not.
By the way, I extremely recommend their channel. Go check it out. Luce's trauma prior to the Boiling Isles with being bullied and ostracized had an impact on her self-worth, making her unconsciously do extreme things to earn the approval of her peers, even when it's not needed. This is similar to Ida at a young age, where her pranks started out as misguided good intentions, but grew more mischievous.
Filled the detention pit with green gelatin.
It was his birthday. He liked it.
The only difference is that Ida was unconsciously thinking she had to fulfill the role of troublemaker that everyone put her in. For Luce, doing these off-the-wall things and wanting to become a witch comes from her want to be accepted. Obviously, she has an interest in being a witch, but a part of it feels connected to the want for acceptance. Luce's self-worth is practically non-existent when she's not being determined. And I hate to say it, but Camila didn't help things. I love her, I do, and she really loves Luce's creativity, as she said herself, and she isn't harsh. However, her wording here is very...
But I don't like any of that stuff. I like editing anime clips to music and reading fantasy books with convoluted backstories.
Mija, your fantasy world is holding you back. Do you have any friends? Real ones. Not imagined or drawn or reptilian. Summer camp is a chance to make some friends. But you have to try. Can you do that?
Yes, Mom.
Yikes. She's inadvertently putting the blame on Luce and her interests instead of thinking about how to deal with the bullies or how to get Luce to socialize without taking away her interest. Camila had good intentions, but it could have been handled better. She's not a bad parent at all. She just made a mistake, but I'm certain that she's gonna make up for it. Luce is thankfully in a supportive and loving environment, but that alone isn't gonna fix years of ostracization and lack of self-worth and unhealthy coping mechanisms. Luce is a people pleaser and struggles from doing too much self-sacrifice and having a lack of self-worth. I'm going off script here, but the reason I really wanted to make this video is that I myself struggle from what Luce is going through right now. I had a very similar childhood, and I was scared of people making fun of my interests. I wasn't directly bullied about them, but I had that fear, and unfortunately, I never really learned how to socialize, along with other factors. I socialize a lot better in online groups where I know that they share my interests, but when it comes to new people, I really do struggle. And I tend to put too much blame on myself. I apologize a lot of the time, and unlike Luz, I do have trouble setting boundaries. It's something that I'm working on, and I honestly think we should talk about people who do suffer from this. Again, it's not a mental illness by itself, but I still feel like it should be talked about, because being a people pleaser, just like in the moderate sense, is okay and doesn't really need looking at. But if it does get to an extreme, which it has for me, to the point where it almost felt like an addiction and debilitating, I do think that it does need to be talked about. And the fact that Diana most likely is showing this in her show, I think that's incredible. So yeah, I just wanted to put my own little personal blurb in here. I've been through this. I've had fear of rejection, abandonment. I've been where Luce is right now. But yeah, like, along with me being a psych major, I'm able to see these things because I myself have gone through them. I know this is very off script, but I just wanted to put that there. In conclusion, therapy now!